Hello, folks. How are you all doing today? Sorry, I'm a bit late. I was rushing around, trying to do lots of things. Well, today I'm going to talk about something that a lady rang. I talked to one of the students about this in the week, and I thought it was a really good topic to look at. And the topic is, she was doing the Understanding the Mind course, and she's also done a few other courses. And we're saying, well, I'm really trying hard to apply this idea of not being in your mind, but it's really hard because, like, if I'm ironing, I'm still thinking about other things. I'm not actually ironing. I'm thinking about ironing or concentrating on ironing. I'm thinking about everything else. And so I thought we'd look at that, and not just how to do it, but why it's important. But before I start, I would just like to say that the course Making Sense of Everything does look at this in detail. So Making Sense of Everything does look at this in detail. So I will go straight into this. By the way, I am at the moment doing a special offer where each course is being free for a week. So if you'd like to sample one of the 6 EDM Academy courses, ranging from core motivational training and understanding anger, which is all about feelings and who you are. And then there's the 3 mind courses: understanding the mind, understanding stress, understanding anxiety. And this chat I'm going to do today is about understanding the mind. And then there's the 3rd course, which is Making Sense of Everything, which puts everything together and shows you how to apply it. You don't have to do any course in any particular order, although it's a good idea to start with either core motivational training and then do anger, or start with mind and then do the mind courses. So anyway, let's carry on. So how do you stay? I'll just see what this text is, because it may be the lady who, yes, she is. Are you wearing a light coloured top? Yes, I think I am wearing a light coloured top. Yes. Yes, sorry about this. Yes, streaming now. Streaming now. Find my channel. It's the logo. In fact, I might just ring her because I think she's the only person who's actually here at the moment. Ah, can you see me then? Okay, Julie, could you want to text me? Let me ring you, actually. Let me ring you. Oh. Hello? Hi, Julie, it's me. Are you watching me? Right, but you can't type then. All right, well, just text me if you want a question, but I'm going to talk about what you asked me earlier. Okay, right. Right, well, that's great. So Julie's watching me, but she doesn't know how to type, which I don't either, actually. I mean, I can on a laptop, but I can't on the phone. I don't even use a smartphone. But anyway, so Julie, hi. So why is it? So how do we do it? Leave our mind when we're doing tasks, and why is it important? Okay. How do we do it? Well, really, it's a discipline. You have to practice, practice, practice. And in all of the 6 EDM courses, there are exercises. There are 16 exercises, right? 16. And these exercises give you a discipline, give you a practice that you must do, and then you get the hang of it. It shows you how to actually get out of your mind and stay in the present. It tells you how to look at for your anger triggers, how to look at the anxiety triggers, all sorts of things, and they're really important. So they're included in the courses. So let me know, Julie, if you need them. I'm going to revisit. I'm going to double check they're on the courses. I know they're on the courses, but I'm not sure if they're on the online setup. I'm pretty sure they are. But if not, I can send you them. So, by the way, people, when you buy the courses off me, you buy the files. So I send you all the files. That includes all 16 courses, okay? But then you have an opportunity to actually do them online, so it's a bit more interactive. And you can ask questions and stuff. And I'm not sure if they have the exercise in them. I'm pretty sure they do. But anyway, the exercises will be coming with you shortly. So Julie, so bear with me on that one. But one of the exercises, I think it's in core motivational training, really is to be very present. And the way you do that is you focus on your 5 senses. And this is pretty standard. You probably hear this a lot in from other people about how to stay in the present. And you just basically have to focus on what you're doing. You have to focus on what you're doing and give that your full attention. And sometimes what helps is to do things very slowly. So if I'm making a cup of tea like here, if I do it slowly, I'm much more aware of it. You know, and just look at what you're doing and just be aware of it. Now I'm going to sip it. Appreciate it. Don't be grateful, that's mind. Just appreciate it. And when you're washing up, appreciate the fact you can wash up. When you're brushing your teeth, appreciate the fact you can brush your teeth. So really focus on what you're doing. Really focus on what you're doing. You can, if you wish, focus on what you're doing it for. So when you're ironing, whose clothes are you ironing? What are you ironing it for? So keep real. Keep real. Keep focusing on what you're doing. This is incredibly important for many reasons, and I'll explain why in a minute. But it's so important, and it's almost like we've been trained to not be in the moment. And in the EDM Academy, it's I call it, if it's a house, you need to be on the ground floor. So it's really important to stay on the ground floor. And there's so many things: planning, goal setting, electronics, television, computers, smartphones, constant being on social media. That changes your brain, so you're much more likely to be living life through your mind, which is on the first floor of your house, and you don't actually experience anything firsthand as a feel. You actually experience things from your mind, which is from processing. You're processing stuff. So when you're watching television, you're not actually doing what's on television. You're looking at someone else doing something on television and then emotionally reacting to it. So you're living life almost as a third party observer. You're processing it. That's what the mind does. You're objectifying it. And it's so clever, this, because in a way you have to be objective in the sense that if I'm on the ground floor of the house in the garden, I have to be objective knowing I'm the person and the garden are the flowers. So I need to separate myself from the flowers, right? So I'm in my garden and I'm smelling a flower. I am separate from the flowers. That's how we need to be objective, but we don't want to be objective about the experience. We want to embrace the experience. So the experience of smelling the flower is full on. We're not processing that. What do I think of smelling the flower? I smell a flower and I feel it and I experience it. But in order, and this is important, in order to experience things like that fully, you need to be separate from the plant, from the flower. Otherwise, it's all one big mess. So you need to know where you end and the flower begins so you can then smell it. That's probably a topic for another video, but I can talk about that. It's quite important, actually. People have no boundary, basically. And because they have no boundary, they get overwhelmed by everything. And that's the beginning of sensory issues, ADHD, autism, etc., etc. Because people have no boundaries, they don't know who they are. So they become quite blurred into everything else, and everything becomes overwhelming. So yeah, boundaries are important for many reasons, but one reason is because you need to be separate from things in order to experience them, okay, on the ground floor, in the garden, when you're being a human being. When you are in the mind, in your office upstairs, you're not actually separate, because you're not in your who you are. So you're kind of in your mind. So you're not yet actually in yourself, you're in your mind. So everything is just a process. So you kind of are an observer, but the I in observer isn't there. So you're observing without your I. You're observing without yourself being there, actually. You're just thinking. So it's quite an interesting conundrum, really, because where are you? You're not in your mind. Your consciousness may be in your mind, but you are not. You are actually in the garden. So if I'm in my mind having a plan, thinking about something else, and I'm in the same room as my child who's hitting me because I'm not feeding them a tea, I can still ignore that. And I can still be thinking about my plan, and I can literally ignore the fact I'm being hit in the real world. And this is sometimes what happens. And this is how people can become very traumatized, because in the real world they're getting hit by all sorts of different things, but they literally don't realize, because they're so focused on their mind and what they are living through in their mind, like the past and the future, the plans. And if you put computers and virtual reality on top of that as more layers, then you literally could be living through an avatar. Meanwhile, your real body is in the real world, probably feeling pretty bad. And Ian Banks wrote a book about this called Walking on Glass. Have a read of that. Walking on Glass, brilliant book. Anyway, have a read of that book. So this is why it's so important to stay in your body in the real world. It stops you being in the mind. It stops you. You become aware of stuff, basically, and when you become aware of stuff, you can start to make better decisions. So how do you do that? As I said, just focus on what you're doing. Focus, practice. And if you do want to watch telly, or if you do want to think about something, then have a space for that. Like I do watch telly and I do make plans, but I have a space for it. And I'm probably not doing anything else. I'm probably just lying on my bed or something. That's when I will make a plan, if I'm lying on my bed, or maybe if I'm walking the dog. But I'm not really thinking mind. I sometimes just have an idea, which is the next point. Sorry, I'm going too fast. So if you want to do a mindy activity, ring fence it. So if I want to think about something, as in think about something, then make sure you do it. You're conscious that you're doing it. So I'm now going to think about that, then stop doing it, and then get back to something else, like ironing or driving a car or making a cake or whatever you're doing, and focus on doing that. And then if you do start to find yourself floating off into the mind again, stop that and say, right, okay, I'm going to think about that later, and focus on what you're doing again. Okay, it just takes practice. It is hard. It is really hard. It's practice. So why is it so important? So I've kind of touched a little bit on why it's so important. It's really important. Like one reason is because we have an energy dynamic, and although I don't really talk about that much, we have one, and that's how we experience the world. It depends on what your energy dynamic is, whether it's spirit, mind, feel, positive feeler, negative feeler. It depends on what your mind is like as well, what your admin is like. It's all part of your energy dynamic, basically. So it's very important, because once it's set up, you can change it. And what we do in these courses is show you how to change your energy dynamic consciously. And you can change it into one which will eventually be what I call a positive feeler. But it can take years, and it's all a process, and it's all magical, actually. So we have our experience of life depending on our energy dynamic, and our energy dynamic kind of runs as a default. So if you're not conscious, it will be running that energy dynamic. So if you don't start to practice being in the feel zone, being who you are in your stick self, if you don't start to practice that, you'll be stuck in your default energy dynamic, which is probably mind or spirit. And when I mean mind or spirit, you're either on the roof or you're in the first floor. It'd be very rare that your default will be to be in the garden experiencing everything. You may have moments of it in the day. So say in the day, if the day is 10 units, say you might have 2 units worth of feeler. But really you want about 8, really. So it's important to start practicing being on the ground floor, because this is how you start to change your dynamic. You start to change it by practicing being on the ground floor. Lots of other things will happen, and we look at them in the other courses. But you need to practice being on the ground floor to start with, because that's where we're supposed to be. And that's the only place we can be, which is the next point, where we can become human. And if we are human, then we can, depending on your belief, we can start to connect with spirit, and we can start to receive the grace of God more effectively. We can start to carry out our spiritual meaning and purpose, given who we are. Because we're in the real world, we're being human. If we're in our mind, it's very hard to do that, because you're not really connected to your, what you could call your soul, because your soul is probably in the real world being human, because the soul is part of being a human. And if you're in your mind, although you are within your body, you are still in your human construct, you're not feeling human. You're being mindy. You're starting to go into the past and the future, and you're kind of time traveling. You're not really in your body. And then you go one step further, and you're on the roof, and you're in a spiritual zone when you're actually not really in your body. You're actually above it, and you can't connect to your soul very well then, because your soul is in your human body. That's how I see it anyway. Your soul is part of being human in the real world, and it's where your love and care comes from. You can't really do that in this quite heavy mass density through spirit. Spirit can do it through the grace of God, absolutely. But as a human, you can't. You can't. You're human, so you need to be in your human body to do stuff. That's kind of the whole point. If we were all spirits, then you wouldn't have to be human. If you follow. So you kind of need to be human in order to do stuff that is is inspired by the Holy Spirit, and given to you by the grace of God, given who you are, which is a blessing. And you need to be in the human garden of yourself to do that. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Otherwise, it kind of gets stuck in the mind. It kind of gets stuck there, because if this is where you live, then all this stuff will just get stuck there. So you might think you're being kind, but actually, are you even present? Are you even present? And then it gets kind of quite wrapped up in the ego as well, which is another story. So why is it very important to stay in the garden in the ground floor? Is because it's much, much, much easier to stay human. And if you stay human, it is much, much easier, I would argue, to become connected to God, I would say. And in a kind of way, this is what it's all about, because if we do leave ourselves and we go in our mind, then all our human amazingness is gone. And the best thing we can do, I think, is to create. We can use imagination, and we can create, and we can if I create something with you and we're similar, then what we create together is bigger than what I could do on my own, or what you could do on your own. And that's part of the alchemy of human beings, and it's magical. And that's, I would say, what we're here to do, given the grace of God. So that's why it's so important. That's why it's so important to stay on the ground floor, even though it's hard. But you can do hard, and these courses will show you how to do hard, and your mind can calm down, and you can do it, and you can learn to live and love being in this way. I promise. Right, Julie, if you've got any other questions, text me. Otherwise, I shall finish up. So I'll just wait for Julie now. Okay, Julie. Well, I've assumed that that was okay. So I'll finish off here then. Thank you for your question. And I will be doing another YouTube. Oh, hold on. Okay. Question. If you need to make time for planning, is it the same for reflection? Okay, good points. When I'm walking the dog or when I'm doing gardening, I often have a blank mind. I'm not actually thinking of planning. I'm not thinking goal setting. I'm not going into the future. I'm not going into the past. I'm not thinking. I have a blank mind. And I'm walking the dog and I'm aware of the dog and I'm aware of the trees and I'm just walking along with a blank mind, but I'm just doing the walk. And then what happens is, out of nowhere, suddenly an idea will come, and then I will start to ponder on the idea. And I think that's what you mean by reflection. Something will come up, and I'll reflect on that, and I will reflect on that as I'm walking the dog. But I'm very aware that I'm very aware to keep in walking the dog mode. Okay, it's you don't have to have a blank mind when you're doing things. You just have to be focusing on what you're doing. So if I'm focusing on walking the dog and then I suddenly get a random idea about something, I will go with that because that's not me thinking. That's a random idea that's come from an inspiration, which is different. I call it ideaing. Okay, ideaing, IDEA. RING, ideaing, rather than thinking. So that would be point one. So if things pop up as you are doing your ironing, then feel free to grab hold of them and contemplate them or imagine them. That's cool because that's come from within you. This isn't about thinking in the future about what you need to achieve or what someone else thinks. It's not about outside, it's about inward you. So that's great. That's great. So reflection, I would say, falls into that category. Nothing wrong with making a safe space for reflection either. Nothing wrong with that at all. You could write down what you want to reflect on and put it, put down the pencil and paper, and then shut your eyes and reflect. But remember to use your imagination, not your mind. Don't start thinking about it. Just imagine. So reflect, ponder, but don't think. Let your imagination it's almost like dreaming. It's almost like dreaming, but just make sure that you're not thinking. It's just organically coming out as a reflection. Okay, good question. I do a lot of, I call it ideaing when I'm walking the dog, but that's not because I'm thinking about it. It's just that's when it pops up. So if things pop up, then go with it. But that is very different from thinking it. Thinking it's quite an effort, and you're not sure what's this, what's that. It's quite an effort, and you're quite conscious of it. Whereas if you're just ironing and you're looking at the iron and thinking, "Oh, I like this iron, I like this shirt. This shirt was this." You'll from nowhere, something will come up, and you're like, "Oh, wow, where did that come from?" And then I guess you can ponder on it, and then I kind of go into imagination a bit. But if it goes too everywhere, I just shut it down again, or I write it down, because it often happens with me with work. Funny enough, I often just get an idea about work, and I kind of play with it a bit. But then I write a list. Often it's what to do video on. Often, or something like that, and then I action that. So I guess it depends what you're reflecting on. If you're reflecting on your own behavior, that's probably a good one to probably put into a special space. So maybe when you get home and you're having a cup of tea, you think, well, I'm going to reflect for 5 minutes on my behavior. But I think that's the key. It's about you. It's about you. It's your reflection. It's my ideas. It's whatever. What you're not doing is you're not going everywhere thinking about everyone else. It's about you. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way. I mean that in the way that only you can sort you out. You can't actually do anything else about anyone else anyway. I have another text. Right. In my job for the tick box. Okay, in my job for tick box exercises, we are encouraged to reflect on experience about how learning if something works or not. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I would say that if you're reflecting on did I do a good job or not, number one, that probably would take 5 minutes. And number two, you probably should have a special time to think about that because in my work, for example, I have to be very careful. Well, everyone does. Be careful you do your job right. So if I catch myself, I want to reflect, how did that go? Ask for feedback, that sort of thing. But put it in the I'm doing my job category and give it the proper attention it deserves. Give it the proper attention it deserves, because then you are in the ground floor because you're concentrating on something that's happening in the real world, e.g. your job performance. That's what you're focusing on. What you're not doing is ironing and going upstairs and wondering how's your job performance. You need to make it real and present and relevant and in the now, and think, right, did that work well or not? Face the facts and see how you did that, rather than going in your mind thinking how it should have been, or was it someone else's fault, or whatever. So yeah. Yeah, I think the other point you're making there as well is it depends what you do with it. I mean, it's often a very subtle thing, really. It's what you do with it. I find these tick box exercises really difficult because there's no context, So okay, all right then. Is that okay then, Julie? I think you're up here as watching. That's great. So thank you for watching. I'm going to the next course to be released is Understanding Stress. I shall put that out tomorrow morning. Oh, here we are. Yeah, no context. Exactly. Yeah. I remember failing at least 2 tests. One was when I was I don't know, I think in fact I remember what happened. I was in my late 20s and I went for a job in Sainsbury's or something, and a really, just a literally pushing trolley job, and I failed it because of my answers in the tick box questionnaire, and I got my result the same day as I got my master's degree result, which was a pass, which struck me as hugely ironic that I could pass a MIA degree, but I could not pass a Sainsbury's basic entry level tick box exercise. So there we are. Yeah, thank you, Julie. So tomorrow morning I will put the Understanding Stress course out there, and I'll message it to you, Julie, and I'll also put it on Facebook. But thank you very much. I hope this is useful. Thank you for the question. Love to answer your questions. Take care. Bye for now.